Basically, I'll speak about how just transition can be planned in the context of Korba district. Some of the points have been discussed earlier in the session, so I'll briefly touch upon some of the points. Just to give a briefing of the district profile as a recap, the district has about Korba 1.3 million population. Urban proportion is about 40%, rural is 60%. What is unique about this district, it is a Schedule 5 area with about 41% scheduled tribe population. Another important thing about Korba is that despite it being India's largest coal producer, about 66% of the geographical area is under forests, which is very, very unique with respect to any coal district. The second comes in the district is agricultural land, which is about 20%, which is largely rain-fed agriculture is practiced here. But the land holdings are very small in this district. About 65% are marginal, which is below 1 hectare. And overall, there is about 27,000 hectares of land that is available with coal mines and power plants. This includes 4 of the mines that are in pipeline and will start shortly in 1 to 2 years. If we look at the coal context of Korba, it is the top coal producer currently contributing to about 16% of India's coal production and quite a significant amount of installed power capacity of about 6.5 gigawatt. But not just for Korba, the coal is important for other districts of Chhattisgarh as well. And as this map shows, it is feeding into iron and steel plants, cement plants, chemical factories of other parts of Chhattisgarh. The district GDP, in fact, is highly reliant on coal. About 50% is coming from coal mining. But in this all win-win scenario, there are externalities and particularly environmental externalities, as Korba also remains a severely polluted area as identified by the Central Pollution Control Board. In fact, earlier Korba was a critically polluted area. It has slightly improved in terms of its environmental performance. Now, this is the geography of Korba with respect to its coal mines and power plants. And if we see the maps, it is largely concentrated in 2 blocks, Katgora and Korba. Katgora is a rural district and Korba also has a lot of rural part, but there is a high urban concentration around the municipality. So this is where most of the industrial activities are concentrated in this district. So considering the demographic distribution of the district as well as the distribution of the thermal power plants and the coal mines, we constituted a survey. How do we design it? We took 600 households as a survey, and which is a representative sample, spreading it out across the district dependent on the demographic concentration, the caste distribution, as well as the urban to rural population. And it's a representative sample in that sense. We also had 21 focus group discussions at various points of times over a 3-month period, numerous interviews with key functionaries, as well as it was an extensive review of government and industry data. This is a map of the variety of stakeholders we have interviewed, talked to, hold FGDs with. It involves government, it involves public representatives, such as PRIs and ward members. It involves industry, both coal mining and coal-based power, industry associations like small and medium industries, road transport, labor unions of both INTAC and BMS, workers of all coal mining and coal-dependent industries, and this involves both formal and informal workers. We consulted the local communities, particularly the forest-dependent people and the agricultural communities, and in fact, women's self-help groups, and finally, civil society members who are particularly working in these districts and active there. The key issue, what our research shows from Just Transition, and I have summarized, the report is exhaustive and extensive. It will be uploaded today. That there is a high proportion of non-workers in the district, despite it being a top coal producer. About 54% of the people within a working age group are non-workers. And what is also important, as we are looking ahead in time right now, there is a clear gender disparity in the workforce. Among the non-workers, there are 73% of women, And in the workers, it is only 22%. So definitely the women workforce participation has to improve going ahead as we plan a just transition. The second thing is that agriculture is the largest contributor in terms of absolute employment in the district. There is a lot of people involved in miscellaneous labor work and small businesses. And then comes the coal industry and government jobs and others. And also there is a clear spatial concentration because most of these opportunities are concentrated within a 10-kilometer radius, the mine clusters and the power plants. And as you move ahead from that, it is largely agriculture and forests. We discussed this. Over 87,000 workers are directly dependent on coal mining and coal dependent industries. And the kind of industries we captured in the report are coal-based power plants, road transport, coal washery, fly ash brick, or all the major ones in the district. The formal and informal workforce distribution, in fact, in coal mining and thermal power plants actually came out to be very equal. It's not as distinct as what we had found earlier in our study in Jharkhand, but the informality largely exists in the road transport sector. And I would say this is one of the telling findings of the Korba study, where in fact the employment in the road transport sector is nearly equal to the formal employment in coal mining. So we really need to take this sector seriously as we plan a just transition. We have mapped the informal workers because this is a sector which is very poorly understood in terms of their skill levels, their education levels, and will require targeted intervention. What it comes out is most of the informal workforce is poorly skilled, except for people who are doing some mechanical work in the thermal power plants or the drivers. At the same time, their earnings are fairly low, particularly in coal mining, where about 40 to 45% people are earning below rupees 10,000 per month. Similarly, for thermal power plants, it is a little better, but not too much difference. So this is something we really need to consider going ahead. Overall, the district has the reliance on public sector services or social services is largely dependent on the government. This is also because people also have very poor income. They're reliant on government scheme. They're reliant on government support. And we have analyzed various key development sectors such as healthcare, education, basic amenities such as drinking water, access to cooking fuel. Everywhere the government reliance is very high. Only for cooking fuel, because it's a highly forested district, there is a high reliance on firewood beyond the mining clusters and power clusters. But other than that, this is a district which is highly reliant on government support. We already discussed this, that about 32% of the district's population is multidimensionally poor and requires targeted intervention in all these areas. So basically, to summarize, what we found was that Korba fares poorly with respect to most of economic and development indicators, and thus remains highly vulnerable to any unplanned transition. Considering the thing in totality, there will be a need for broad-based socioeconomic transition planning through economic diversification and development intervention. And finally, what we have been discussing since morning, yes, the transition should be planned in a way not just being focused on coal industries, coal workers who are somewhat in some ways benefiting from it at varied levels, but also those people who remain impoverished, such as the tribal community, such as the agricultural laborers. So it has to be a plan in totality. Then the report details out what can be a just transition planning approach and what are some of the key intervention areas. And we have developed a transition planning matrix highlighting 8 key components and various subcomponents around it. The first is that there is a requirement of developing an inclusive planning mechanism for just transition planning and execution. The second thing is determining a clear timeline. Skilling and reskilling of the workforce will be necessary, planning economic diversification, repurposing of land and infrastructure, which is essentially feed into the economic diversification. There will be requirement for investments in social and environmental issues, revenue substitution planning, which will go hand in hand with economic diversification, in fact, and finally, we need to secure the resources, the finances for just transition. The report analyzes 2 policy scenarios to contextualize the time frame of Korba. And we have taken one is called the current policy scenario, which is essentially based on existing government policies and outlook. It takes into assumption that India will meet its net zero target by the year 2070, and coal-based power plants can be phased out by 2050, and non-coking coal production will cease by 2040. So we are not going into the coking coal production, which is tied to our steel industries. We also have taken into account that planned expansion of the existing mines can go on till the year of 2025, but if we have to meet the targets, coal has to peak by 2030. The other scenario is the net zero scenario, which is a more ambitious scenario and which is asking for a stiffer but achievable pathway for this transition. Here we are looking at India becomes ambitious about reaching a net zero by 2050. In that scenario, both coal-based power and non-coking coal production will be phased out by 2040, which is about 20 years from now. Now, if we take the current policy scenario, what essentially comes is closure of coal mines in Korba can happen by the year 2050 in a phased manner. And for power plants, it can happen by 2040. And accordingly, we need decadal development planning. If we take the net zero scenario, both of these closures can happen by 2040. And we'll show how this can happen. We have documented the economic disruptions as well as the economic opportunities around it. So under the current policy scenario, what happens is in 3 phases, coal can be phased out. We do not touch on the biggest mine in the first 10 years, but just work around the low profitable underground mines, which is essentially producing less than 2 million tons of coal currently. Over a 30-year period, the total coal production foregone will be just 4.6 million tons. And the revenue foregone will be about 27.5 billion Indian rupees, which is about 0.4 billion US dollars. This is very much achievable and with least economic disruption. Of course, under net zero scenario, the revenue foregone and the coal production foregone will be much higher, but we are currently planning as per the CPS. For power plant closures, as we said, that they are aging, there will be not too much disruption, and all the power plants in Korba can be closed down in the next 20 years, considering their age, considering what the Central Electricity Authority has outlined, and our own analysis. Now, this is the essential component of just transition, and again, we have discussed this. One of the biggest opportunities of Korba is it has an aging formal workforce, both in the coal mining and the power sector. And this is a story we think, at least for the coal mining sector, it can be applicable to many parts of the country as well if we look into the workforce distribution of workers, because anyway, workers in coal mining has been going down due to mechanization. So this is a trend we might be finding in other parts of the country as well. What will be necessary is skilling and re-employment of about 30% of the workforce associated with coal mining and 27% for NTPC and CSPGCL workers. So this is the thing which we have to focus on. The informal workers will definitely need government support, and also infrastructure investment can provide employment opportunities for them. In fact, infrastructure investment has co-benefits also of attracting businesses in these districts and in many other parts of the country. The economic diversification planning should have a clear goal. As we have seen, 50% of Korba's GDP is tied to coal mining. Therefore, we need a balanced GDP going ahead, where equal emphasis should be laid on primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. The key opportunities looking at the local resources lies with agriculture, forestry, and fishery sector as primary sectors of the economy. But we need to provide also for low carbon industrial development. And there are many industries that can come up with the necessary government policy support and impetus. But looking just as a kickstart, we can build on the non-timber forest product processing, agro-processing, and definitely the renewable energy. I will leave many of these to the discussions in the panel because we have experts in all of these in our panel today. We feel that investments in education and skill development will be extremely important for strengthening the service sector, and so as investments in healthcare and education sector will also provide co-benefit of achieving some of the development goals in the district. Land reclamation and repurposing cannot be emphasized enough. We have discussed this. it has both environmental and economic benefits. In fact, coal mining areas are also polluted. So we need a scientific and ecological land restoration effort to minimize the environmental harms, but as well as to reap the economic benefits. And I'll not touch on this because Chandrabhushan has already elaborated on this point. Finally, we need responsible environmental and social investments to build resilience. And this will also involve reform of policies and laws in their current form. We need environmental remediation on pollution mitigation measures in these areas. First and foremost is scientific closure of mines. In fact, the Ministry of Mines is in the process of formulating a robust mine closure framework. We need reclamation and redevelopment of industrial land through proper remediation. And finally, there will be disposal of assets, which requires the intervention and implementation of our waste management laws and policies. We will need interventions in social infrastructure and building human capital, aligning with the development targets of SDGs, and there are also national benchmarks. So we should target achieving at least those in the coming years through investments in education, through investments in healthcare, and particularly improving access to basic amenities. In fact, we need investment in distributed RE. The ministry has in fact come up with a framework now how distributed RE can enhance local livelihood opportunities. And this is something definitely will be important for a district like Korba. This is the finance mapping that we have done in the report, where we have taken into account that the revenue loss that will happen, but also the substitution can happen and what are the opportunities in hand. Overall, what we can say is that under the current policy scenario, we can have about 1.5 trillion rupees over the next 3 decades for investing in just transition in Korba. And we have analyzed decade by decade the amount of money that will be available. A key opportunity to kickstart the process lies with District Mineral Foundation funds, which Korba receives about 5.5 billion per year, amounting to about $73 million US. Going ahead, we have discussed through necessary policy reforms, if the coal cess is made available, it will be the biggest trend fund for supporting just transition. But said and done, that will definitely not be enough because it's a huge process and we will need private financing as well as international support to accelerate the process. So this is going to take a cooperation and work together of the state government, the central government, as well as the international community. Another key opportunity that is in hand is through convergence of government schemes and programs that are there in Chhattisgarh and some of which are currently ongoing in Korba. And we have highlighted a number of schemes in the report. And we feel that there are many small amount, large amount of money under various of the schemes, and they all align with development goals of the state and the country. So if we can put together the pool of resources, align their goals, it can provide the impetus for Korba to move on faster. Finally, and I'll end with this, the coal and power industry, though we are talking of a coal and coal-based power phase out, but we think that their restructuring and reinvestment in different businesses will be a very, very important aspect of the just transition. Because our coal sector is hugely public sector undertaking, we have companies like NTPC who are going through diversification now. So these companies can play a key role in the economic restructuring that is necessary for Korba and many other coal districts of India. These are some of the figures actually that are up there. CIL already has established 2 wholly owned subsidiaries for solar PV, for manufacturing RE. NTPC has also established its wholly owned RE subsidiaries. In fact, the CEO is joining us today in the next session to talk more about it. And the good news is that the government is supporting these ventures. The Ministry of Coal has asked the coal companies to develop their decarbonization plans. Then definitely there is government impetus. And overall, what this all can help together is to achieve a just transition in Korba with the support of the government, with the support of the industries, and certainly with the support of the local community and all the other stakeholders. And thank you.